Hi there, I'm Jorven, and I'm here to explain everything I know about the Factorio circuit network. There's a lot to go over, and I don't like long intros, so let's get started. So, the most important part of the circuit network are the wires. They can be accessed through these two buttons on the toolbar, and come in two types, red and green. Wires can be placed between power poles, or more importantly, between buildings. Most buildings in the game can be connected to the wires, but for now I will only use a single chest connected to a simple lamp. Like how the copper wires already on the power poles carry electricity, circuit wires carry information in the form of signals. Signals can be generated from a great number of sources, the simplest of which is the chest, which will only ever transmit whatever items are inside as a signal. If I place 100 iron plates in here, then hover my mouse over the power pole, we'll see it is now carrying a signal of 100 iron plates. If I have multiple sources of the same signal, say multiple chests all with iron plates, then the results are added together. So 2 chests of 100 iron plates gives a signal of 200 iron plates. Now, you may ask, what is the difference between the red and the green wires? The answer is, there is no difference. They simply don't interact with one another. If I connect a red wire to this chest as well, the power pole now shows that I have 100 iron plates on both green and red. Sometimes you just need to have 2 separate signals over the same place which don't interact with each other. So, we've generated a signal, now what can we do with it? If I click on the lamp over here, we'll now see that we have a bunch of options to the right. Ignore these ones for now, all we're interested in is this top one, enable disable. This is a basic conditional statement. It will look at the incoming signal and compare it to something. If the statement is true, the lamp will turn on. What that something is up to you. We have access to the basic operators of greater than, less than, equal to, and so on. So if I say enable if iron plates are greater than a value of another signal, or a specific value by typing it in, say 80. So as long as this lamp is receiving an iron plate signal greater than 80, it stays on. If I take some out so it has 50, it turns off. These are the fundamental basics of the circuit network. We are generating signals with some buildings, which are then carried over wires, which are then read by other buildings, which then do some function based on that signal. The complicated bit is, well, the rest of this video. So, as I said before, most buildings in the game can be connected to the circuit network, and will either be able to output a signal based on some factor, be controlled in some manner by signals, or both. There are far too many to go through for this video, but there is a full list on the wiki if you want to read it. This is just a small selection of some simple, useful functions. Belts can enable on a condition, but what's far more useful is the read belt contents when switched to all belts. This will output a signal of the contents of the entire belt line, which continues on indefinitely, broken only by splitters and sideloading. This enables a technique known as a sushi belt, where we have multiple items all shared on the same belt. So, with a simple setup like this for our labs, we can have science going around in a loop to be picked up by the labs, with the contents of the loop being read, and then fed into a pair of inserters, which will each distribute science packs when levels of science on the loop fall below a certain level, in this case 20. So, if I turn on this belt, we'll see the science levels go up as they're placed onto the loop, and go down as the inserters grab them for the labs. An ordinary rail signal can be set to turn red on a condition, regardless of the actual state of the block ahead of it. Likewise, a gate can output a signal when a player is close. When we combine these two, we can create a safe level crossing where trains will stop if a player is nearby. Radars got a buff in the recent 2.0 update, which rather seems to have gone, shall we say, under the radar. Any signal that you feed into a radar will be transmitted to all other radars on the same planet. This basically means you don't have to run power poles everywhere to get a signal where you need it. The power switch needs us to use the copper wire, also found on the toolbar, to manually create new electricity connections. If we connect it to the circuit network and make its condition become true, then the switch will activate and let electricity flow. This is a somewhat niche use, but it's useful in one particular purpose that I'll get to later. The display panel can be used to make static signs, but it can also dynamically change its message if you set up a bunch of conditions beforehand. Again, not much use here. The display panel turns out to be a less loud version of the programmable speaker. There's actually a lot of fun stuff you can do with this. You have a bunch of different alarm sounds and also musical notes. If its condition is true, it can send out a custom alert, as if you're getting attacked by bugs. The logical extreme is that you can do something like this. So we know how to generate signals and a few things we can do with them, but sometimes we need something more. Maybe we need to generate a new signal, find out the difference between signals, compare signals to one another, or maybe even filter out a signal from several. This is where combinators come in. There are 4 types, each for manipulating or transforming a signal in some way. The constant combinator is the simplest. It acts like a chest, but it can generate any number of signals of any value that we want. So, say 14 barrels. You also have access to a large number of virtual signals, which are signals which don't represent items and can be whatever you want. Also, new in 2.0, we now have access to logistics groups. By giving a set of signals a name, we can then load that set of signals inside another constant combinator and edit all combinators with that group from anywhere, including inside your player's inventory. With the other 3 combinators, the Arithmetic, Decider, and Selector, they all have a separate input and output, which you can see by enabling Alt mode. Make sure you don't mix them up and don't connect the input to the output unless you know what you're doing. Weird things will happen. The Arithmetic Combinator is used for performing some simple, and some not so simple, math operations on signals. You can choose 2 different signals or values to play with, and then select an operator. You have your basic multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction, and these are what you'll use for like 99% of cases. These ones down here are for things like bit shifting operators with binary functions and whatnot, which I barely understand, and are far beyond the scope of a video titled The Basics. Finally, you can select the output, and this can be any signal you want. It does not have to be amongst the inputs. So, if we multiply the iron plate signal by 20, it'll output as 400, represented as a steel signal. Additionally, if we add a new constant combinator and give it a value of, say, 25 iron plates, and connect it to the combinator on the red wire, we can now play with channel filters. We can choose to multiply the input signal from either just the green channel, or just the red channel, or both of them simultaneously, in which case the input signal will be added together. The Decider Combinator is probably the one I find myself using the most. It acts like the conditional statements we saw inside the lamp. We can select 2 signals or values to compare against, and use the same comparator operators. So, say iron plates, comparing against a value of 15. If I turn the operator to greater than, it turns the tab green, meaning the condition is true. On the output side, we can tell it to output a value of a chosen signal, defaulting to 1, but it can be anything you want. or simply to pass through one of the input signals. We can also add multiple conditions for it to check at the same time. And like a train wait condition, we can change the AND and OR connectors, and then drag around the tabs, or to get the particular logic order that you're looking for. And of course at the end we can add multiple outputs as well. Finally, the Selector Combinator is the newest addition to the circuit network and can do some weird things. It has no input-output sides, but rather 4 different operations it can perform on input signals. If we have several inputs, all of varying values, the Select Inputs option will then sort those signals by their value and output either the highest or the lowest of the inputs. Meanwhile, the index value will determine at which point in that list the output starts at. So an index of 0 will output the highest, 1 will output the second highest, 2 the third highest, and so on. Count inputs will output a chosen signal with a value of how many unique inputs the combinator is receiving. So we have inputs of iron, copper, steel, and plastic right now. So we're getting an output signal, chosen as iron, with a value of 4. Whatever value the input signals have are not considered. Random input will output a random of its input every certain number of game ticks. For the record, the Factorio game engine operates at 60 updates per second, so setting this number to 60 will change the output to once per second. Stack size will output, well, the stack sizes of whatever items it receives, ignoring any virtual or fluid signals. You can check the stack size for yourself by hovering your mouse over any item in your inventory and seeing what it says right here. When playing around in the signal slots in conditionals and combinators, you may have noticed these 3 colorful signals at the top. Anything, each, and everything. These are known as logic signals, and they're used to compare against multiple input signals at the same time. Everything compares against all signals simultaneously. It will only return as true if the condition is true for all signals at once. So, if the condition is everything is greater than 10, and I have 3 signals of 8, 12, and 15, the condition will not trigger. If I take away the 8, then it will trigger, as 12 and 15 are both greater than 10. Conversely, the anything signal will also compare against all input signals, but it will return as true if just one of the signals passes the condition. So, if the condition is anything greater than 10, and we have the same 3 signals, then the condition will trigger as true, because we have at least one signal which is greater than 10. Finally, the each signal is used exclusively within decider and arithmetic combinators. It will perform the chosen operation on all input signals individually. So, if the condition is each greater than 10, outputting each, and I have 4 signals with the values of 2, 5, 12, and 20, only those 2 larger ones will be passed through, as they're the only ones that meet the condition. As another example, within arithmetic combinators, if we go each multiplied by 2, outputting each, then the combinator will simply double each of the input signals. This means that you basically don't have to have a separate combinator for each signal you want to multiply. This is a handy little circuit which is useful in a lot of situations. Let's say you want to have a chest stocked with a specific number of multiple items, all fed by a single inserter. Obviously, limiting the chest won't help. Instead, place a constant combinator and fill it with the values of the items that you want it to contain. Say 8 iron plates, 12 copper plates, and 5 steel plates. Then, place an arithmetic combinator. Wire the constant combinator to the output of the arithmetic, and then also to the inserter in question. Then connect the chest to the input of the arithmetic combinator. Inside the combinator, we are going to select each multiplied by -1, outputting each. So this will turn whatever items are in the chest into negative numbers, which will be subtracted from whatever's in the constant combinator. And then inside the inserter itself, select Set Filters. So now it has those filters selected. If we turn the belt on, it'll start grabbing those items, and it'll start filling up to that chest. So now we can see we have just slightly above what is needed, and that's purely due to the stack size. If we override the stack size and turn it back to 1, and then remove the items, the inserter will fill up exactly to whatever we want. If you've reached advanced oil processing for the first time, then you've probably noticed that oil refineries will pump out heavy oil, light oil, and petroleum gas all in different amounts. And if one backs up, the entire system shuts down. Sure, you could just add more tanks and delete some when one backs up, but that's just not the Factorio way of doing things. The chemical plants can turn heavy into light oil and light into petrol. But while petrol is the most in demand of the three, you do want some of the other two, as light oil is needed for rocket fuel, and heavy oil for lubricant, which in turn is needed for robots, blue belts, and most of the space platform buildings. To control all this, what we can do is first feed the outputs from the refineries into a tank for each output. Then, wire them together so we have the amounts of the three fluids on the same channel. Next, wire them to the heavy oil crackers and set them to enable if heavy oil is greater than light oil. This will ensure that the heavy oil is never less than what we have for light oil. Next, wire up all the light oil crackers as well, and we're doing the same thing. Enable if light oil is greater than petroleum gas. All of this together will ensure that the three products will stay roughly the same, provided that you have enough stuff at the end consuming the petroleum gas. The main thing to ensure with this is that you have enough chemical plants capable of cracking away all the heavy and light oil that will be produced. Imagine the situation. You're making power on a mix of solar and steam. You have some accumulators, but it's just barely enough to get by, and you're not making them fast enough. You want to prioritize solar because your steam engines are hogging the coal supply and they're a major source of pollution. You can't just connect it, because then they'll be working at the same time, and that sort of defeats the purpose of using solar. Instead, what we can do is take a power switch and then use the copper wire on your hotbar to attach to one side and then the other, and then remove it so you're isolating the two systems. Then take a single decider combinator and wire the input into wherever your accumulators are. Accumulators will output their charge level as a percentage on the A channel. I'll just connect it to this display so you can see it. Inside the combinator, we'll use three conditions. The first will be if A is less than 20. The second will be if A is less than 95. And the third will be if a control signal, I like check marks, is greater than 0. And our output will be again the same control signal with a value of 1. And our connector will be AND. Connect the combinator to the power switch and tell the power switch to turn on if the control signal is greater than 0. Finally, take an opposite colored wire and connect the output of the combinator to its input. So it looks like this. This creates something known as an RS latch. If I go into editor mode and speed up time a bit so that we can reach nighttime faster, a little longer, there we go. We will see the accumulators start to drain. As they keep draining, eventually they'll reach 19%, at which case the latch will trigger, the switch will turn on, connecting the steam engines and charging the accumulators again. This goes on for a while. So as they charge back up, once they reach 95%, the latch turns off, disconnecting it, and everything starts again. These values here are all configurable. You can switch them up if you want, or turn this around, or use this for any item whose supply may go up and down. Keeping on the subject of power, nuclear reactors will consume 1 uranium fuel cell in exactly 200 seconds, regardless of the actual power draw on the turbines. The solution to conserving fuel cells is to insert one only when we actually need it. To do this, place down a decider combinator and connect its input to both the reactor and a fluid tank which will contain steam. Inside the reactor, enable the Read Fuel option. This will output any fuel cells in the fuel slot or that are being burned. Also enable the Read Temperature option. This will output the reactor's temperature, seen here, on the T channel. This is important as we need the reactor to be above 500 degrees in order to generate any steam. I'll also connect the reactor and the tanks to these displays so you can see the temperature and steam levels more easily. Then, connect the output of the combinator to the inserter putting in the fuel cells. Inside the combinator, there will be 3 conditions, and the connector will be AND for all of them. The first condition will be if fuel cells is equal to 0. This will trigger if there are no fuel cells being burned in the reactor. The second will be if signal T, the reactor's temperature, is less than 550. The third is if steam, which is in the tanks, is less than 5000. Finally, the output will be one control signal. I like the green checkmark. Inside the inserter now, set it to enable if the control signal is greater than 0. And finally, click down here to override the stack size and set it to 1. This is because whenever this combinator triggers, we only want it to insert 1 fuel cell. That's it, really? Now, if I go into editor mode and place a cheaty accumulator thing up here to simulate a half-capacity power draw, and I speed up the game, we'll see the reactor temperature slowly drop to around 500, the steamed tanks will slowly deplete, and once it gets down, the combinator would trigger, a single fuel cell will be inserted, and the temperature will rise again slowly to begin the whole thing over again. Picture this. You've got an iron mine, far from the base, well into biter territory. You want it to be autonomous, but there are so many little things that it needs to sustain itself, all in different amounts. You need bullets for the gun turrets, repair packs for the robots, oil for the flamethrowers, and also extra pipes, walls, radars, and anything else that could conceivably break from the bugs. So how do you fix this? We can get a single train to supply all of these things to any number of distant outposts, all controlled with just a few signals. First, decide where you want the supply train loading station to be. Ideally, this should be somewhere central in the base. The train itself doesn't have to be any particular length, but I like to have 2 cargo wagons for items being carried out, a fluid wagon for flamethrower ammo, and a final wagon for trash items being brought back. In the wagons, set up filters for any items that you may want at an outpost by middle-clicking on a slot and then selecting it from the list. Make sure that any slots you don't use are disabled. I like to have the first wagon for high-demand items like bullets, rockets, walls, and repair packs. The second I load with everything else, so robots, inserters, pipes, power poles, and so on. In my modded Space Age run, this is also how I managed Bioflux deliveries to the Biter Zoo prior to getting to Aquilo. It is delivered to its own requester chests, but the chests on the first wagon get bulk inserters, while the ones on the second get long-handed to allow for more items. So, as an example, this is what a completed supply train loading station might look like. The first is carrying bullets, rockets, walls, and repair packs. The second has pipes, pumps, power poles, robots, roboports, and a few more repair packs. The third has light oil, and the fourth is all the trash items that might come back. Over at the outpost, we'll be using conditional filter inserters for each wagon. So, place down some constant combinators, and put in the values of whatever items from this wagon you want this outpost to be supplied with. So let's say 50 walls, 100 bullets, and 20 repair packs. I also recommend making this a logistics group, say Supply Wagon 1, so you can duplicate and change this later on. Again, with green wire, connect this to the output of an Arithmetic Combinator set to each multiplied by -1, outputting each, and then to all the inserters grabbing from the train wagon. Connect the buffer chest to the input of the Arithmetic Combinator and tell the inserters to set filters. Do this for all the wagons that might be carrying something you want unloaded. So now, with the power of editing, you can see that the second wagon is requesting pipes, inserters, power poles, and the third is requesting 40,000 light oil. And now, once a train arrives, the inserters will only grab up until what they actually need to fulfill whatever's in the constants for each wagon. Now, the inserters might be ready, but now we have to communicate that to both the station itself and the supply train so a train actually does arrive. With red wire, connect the output of the arithmetic to the constant again, and then to a power pole. Do this for all the wagons again, so you now should have all the constants and all the outputs of the arithmetics wired together. The power pole should now show you a positive value of all the items you want at this outpost on the red channel. Wire this into the train station itself. Set the station to enable if anything is greater than 0. This number 0 is a bit debatable. With 0, it will trigger only if a single bullet is missing from the chests, so a larger number like 5 or 10 may do you better. Whatever you choose, continue wiring the red further into the input of another decider combinator, and set it to if anything is greater than 0, or a larger number, outputting 1 of a control signal that you choose. Whatever it is, connect the output of the decider into a radar. Back at the base, take another radar and wire it to the supply train stop with the same colored wire. Inside the supply train itself, it will just have 2 stops, the base and the outpost. The train can wait at the outpost for inactivity, but it will wait back at the base for both inactivity and a circuit condition of our control signal being greater than 0. So now, whenever an outpost gets a supply shortage, its signal will rise above 0, opening the station and sending a signal back to the base, which triggers this condition. The outposts all have the same name, so the train will locate whichever station of however many is open and go to it. So now, when the inserters begin removing items, whatever is taken will have their signals go down, eventually going into the negative when the inserter stack size creates a surplus. If any one of these item signals raises above 0, the station will open again. So now, you can copy-paste this design over any number of distant outposts, and the supply train will keep them all stocked up as they go through materials. Keeping on the subject of trains, train stops in general are probably my single favorite circuit network building, purely from the number of things you can do with it. It has a lot of functions, but the most powerful, in my opinion, is the set train limit option. With this, the station will limit the number of trains going to it to be equal to the value of the L signal it's receiving. Let's say these 2 stations here are 2 separate iron mines. Turning them both on without any control may cause all trains to go to just one, ignoring any cargo ready to ship from the other. With just a single arithmetic combinator, we can dynamically update the station limit based on how many trains the station's buffer chests can fill. I already have some chests here with 4,800 iron ore. Connect the buffer chests to the input of the arithmetic, and then inside it, select it to take iron ore divided by the capacity of the train being loaded. With iron ore in a single cargo wagon, that comes up to 2,000, so we'll be left with a train capacity of 2. If I summon a train, it'll come up here to be loaded. and if I place some inserters to load the train, we'll start to see the limit go down. Conversely, at a drop-off station, we can use the start of a conditional filter inserter. Put in the constant with the target of how much cargo you want at the stop, let's say 10,000, but then connect the output of the arithmetic not to the inserters, but to another arithmetic, and divide the result by the cargo capacity of the train, so 2,000 again, and make the output be an L, and feed that into the stop, which gives us a train capacity of 5. Now, this is a functioning train system, but there's a lot here that could be added on, and a bunch of different ways you can control a train system, period, especially now in 2.0 when we have the schedule interrupt system. So, if anything, this is a framework for a system, so I really encourage you to go into your own testing world and expand on this network, or make something completely new. Welcome to space. Platforms need to be highly independent of their planetary factories, and are gold mines for potential for circuit control. However, one of the most useful is the ability to throttle your fuel supply. Directly pumping fuel and oxidizer into your thrusters is hardly efficient, and you'll get far better fuel efficiency if you can control how much is sent in. First, when you're building your platform, leave room to place a pump between your fuel and oxidizer tanks and the engines. Then, place a decider combinator and, with a green wire, connect the input to the platform hub and the output to the pumps. Then, with the red wire, connect the input of the combinator to its own output. And I know earlier I said not to do that, but this is when we do, and I'll show why. We're going to make a clock. Inside the hub, select Read Velocity. This will output the platform speed as a V signal. Inside the combinator, we'll have two conditions and two outputs. The first condition will be if V signal is greater than 0, and the second will be if A signal is less than 60, and the connector will be AND. So the V signal will be coming in from the platform hub, and will only trigger this when the platform is actually moving. In the output, the first will be outputting an A signal with a value of 1, and the second will be outputting input count, also of A. This has created a clock. The combinator will look at the A signal it's getting, and if it's less than 60, it will output what it's reading, plus 1, which will travel back to the input, and start again 60 times every second. If I give it a V signal from a constant combinator, we'll see the decider rapidly count up to 60 and reset itself. Now, inside the pumps, set them to enable if A is less than 10. This number you can tweak as you wish, but this is the number of frames per second that the pump will be enabled for. Using this method should increase the efficiency number that you can see while hovering your mouse over your thrusters. The higher the better. Now, from the testing that I've done for this video, throttling is far more obvious and advantaged the larger your platform is. So I did 2 runs to Vulcanus on my Aquilo level cruiser that you saw in my Meraxis video, each starting with a fluid tank of just over 20,000 fuel and oxidizer. When we use throttling, we arrive at Vulcanus with about 2,600 of each left. But when I remove the pumps, we actually run out of fuel about 2/3 of the way there, and we spend the rest of the trip with the engine slowly sputtering out. So I guess the lesson here is to always use throttling. And that's what I've got. Above all, like most systems in Factorio, the circuit network is a toolbox meant to solve problems. There are obviously far more ways you can utilize it than what I've shown here. I've already cut out a few examples as this video is long enough as it is. But this is meant to be a demonstration, to show you just how powerful Factorio's most powerful system truly is. What are your favorite simple uses of the circuit network? I may do a volume 2 of this if I get some, because Sweet Kovrex you really delivered with a small mods video. The next video will be the season finale, I guess you could say, to the Modded Planet series. There will be more after that, I promise, but 10 planets for one playthrough is plenty, I think. I will say that the next planet will be needing a lot of lamps. Until then, this has been Jorvin, and thanks for watching.